All right, so let's dive into this meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky on February 28th. On the surface, it seems like, solidifying alliances, maybe even edging towards peace.
Yeah.
And we got this, diplomatic blow up. So what really happened? And what does it mean for the future? To help us unpack all this, we've got an expert with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you give us a little context here for this meeting?
Yeah, this meeting was supposed to be about two key things. One, minerals deal, and the other was strategies for a ceasefire. At the start, things seemed pretty optimistic, but there were underlying tensions that bubbled to the surface pretty quickly.
Okay, so we've got Trump and Zelensky starting off cordial, even optimistic, talking about minerals and ceasefires, and then Vice President J.D. Vance kind of enters the picture, and things take a sharp turn. How do things escalate so quickly?
Yeah. Vance's interjection was definitely a turning point. He criticized how previous administrations had handled the conflict, and that immediately put Zelensky on the defensive. Zelensky countered by highlighting Russia's history of broken promises, and that's when things got really heated.
Heated is putting it lightly. Then Trump accused Zelensky of gambling with World War III. That has sparked a lot of debate. What's your take?
It's probably a bit of both. Trump's style is very direct, very confrontational, but this statement also served a strategic purpose. By accusing Zelensky of escalating the conflict, Trump deflected responsibility from Russia.
So is this a way for Trump to position himself for a pro-Russia stance? It seemed to really undermine Zelensky and Ukraine's position.
Absolutely, and Zelensky wasn't about to just let that slide. He pushed back. He reminded everyone about all of Russia's broken agreements, and this did not sit well with Trump. And the meeting really spiraled from there.
And that's where things really fall apart.
Yeah.
Trump cancels the minerals deal, the joint press conference. What were the immediate consequences of this meltdown?
Zelensky canceled all of his other appearances, but he made a point of thanking the American people directly. It was subtle but significant, separating the U.S. government's actions from the sentiments of the citizens.
So he's trying to maintain goodwill with the American people, which is smart considering he really needs their support. But how did all of this impact the U.S.-Ukraine relationship?
This was a huge blow to their partnership. It really sowed distrust and uncertainty about future collaboration, and it potentially jeopardized crucial U.S. support for Ukraine.
And what about the war itself? Did this fractured peace have any real impact on efforts to reach a ceasefire?
It definitely complicated things. Russia saw the discord as an opportunity to exploit the situation. They were less willing to negotiate, knowing that the unified front had weakened.
So this wasn't just a war of words then, it had real consequences on the battlefield. This also feels like a clash of personalities, a clash of leadership styles. We've got Trump, who is known for this really blunt and unpredictable approach. And then we've got Zelensky, who has shown he's really determined to defend his nation's interests.
Right. Their personalities definitely contributed to the tension. Neither seemed willing to back down at all. And then Vance enters the picture, and it's just like throwing fuel on the fire with his criticisms.
Why do you think Vance felt the need to jump in like that? Was he playing bad cop?
It's tough to say for sure, but his comments did align with a certain faction within the U.S. government, a faction that favors a more conciliatory approach towards Russia. It's possible he saw an opportunity there.
But wouldn't that undermine Zelensky and Ukraine even further?
Exactly, and Zelensky quickly pointed that out. He emphasized the long history of broken promises from Russia.
Which brings us back to that explosive accusation from Trump, gambling with World War III. What was he trying to achieve with that statement? Was it a heat-of-the-moment outburst, or was there something more calculated there?
Most likely both. Trump is known for impulsive statements, but there was also a strategic element to it. By accusing Zelensky of escalating the conflict, Trump shifted blame away from Russia.
Okay, so a way to justify a pro-Russia stance.
Precisely. And that shift in blame is crucial to understanding everything that came after this meeting.
So the meeting implodes. Trump cancels the minerals, deal the joint press conference, immediate consequences.
Zelensky canceled all of his other appearances. But he did express his gratitude to the American people, separating the government from the people.
Smart.
Yeah.
But what about the bigger picture? How did this affect the U.S.-Ukraine relationship?
This was a major blow to their partnership. Distrust, uncertainty about future collaboration, jeopardized U.S. support.
And the war itself. Any impact on ceasefire efforts?
It really complicated things. Russia saw an opportunity, less willing to negotiate.
So not just a diplomatic spat, real-world consequences.
Exactly. And the reverberations were felt beyond Ukraine too. European leaders, while reaffirming their support for Zelensky, they also criticized Trump, strained transatlantic relations.
Domino effect. One blunder leads to a cascade. What about the economic impact? Any ripples?
Oh, absolutely. Financial markets took a hit initially, reflecting the fear of escalating geopolitical tensions. But they rebounded quickly. Investors were betting that it wouldn't escalate into full-blown conflict.
A sigh of relief from the money men. But can this fractured piece be repaired?
That's the million-dollar question, and the answer is complicated.
Well, let's unpack that complexity. You've mentioned the Yi-Jing and the art of war a couple times. How can those help us understand what happened here and maybe what might come next?
So to answer that, we need to delve a little deeper into the Yi-Jing and the art of war. Specifically, Hexagram 36, Darkening of the Light, and Sun Tzu's Counsel on Strategic Retreat.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's explore that.
So you're probably wondering how ancient Chinese philosophy helps us make sense of this diplomatic meltdown. Well, both the I-Ching and the Art of War are all about understanding conflict, recognizing patterns, and applying this timeless wisdom to these complex situations.
Okay, I get that. But how do those concepts apply to Trump and Zelensky?
Okay, let's start with Hexagram 36, Darkening of the Light from the I-Ching. It speaks to a time of adversity. A time when it's wise to conceal your strength, exercise patience, and just observe. It's not about surrender. It's about choosing your battles strategically.
So not charging in head first, but taking a step back. Could that have saved this meeting?
It's possible. Had they really understood each other's positions and concerns, their motivations, their fears, the outcome might have been different. And this goes back to Sun Tzu's advice from The Art of War. Know your enemy and know yourself, and in 100 battles, you will never be defeated.
But it seems like they were so focused on their own goal and their own narratives that they just missed the bigger picture.
That's a crucial lesson for leaders.
In any field.
The need to step outside your own perspective and consider the motivations, fears, aspirations of those you're dealing with. Sometimes building a bridge requires you to retreat, regroup, and approach from a different angle.
So a strategic retreat for Trump or Zelensky, is that realistic?
It's tough to say. Both are known for their stubbornness. But neither can afford to let this rift widen. The stakes are incredibly high. A prolonged war in Ukraine, a fractured transatlantic alliance, global instability.
No one wants that. So let's talk solutions. If a strategic retreat isn't likely, what are some other paths?
Well, one option is mediation by a neutral third party. Maybe the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. They could provide a platform for dialogue. Without baggage, they could act as a referee.
Level the playing field. What else?
Another option is leveraging moral authority. Zelensky has a lot of sympathy and support from the international community. Amplifying his voice, highlighting the injustices faced by Ukraine, could increase pressure on Russia for a ceasefire.
Turning public opinion into a weapon.
Exactly. And then there's the economic angle, offer Russia incentives, like sanctions relief in exchange for a ceasefire.
Carrot and stick. But do any of these have a real chance? What's the most likely outcome?
Predicting the future is always tricky, especially in geopolitics. But I do think there's hope. But it requires both sides to swallow their pride, adopt a more pragmatic approach, and prioritize the greater good.
That's a tall order. Can we connect these ancient concepts back to our own lives? How can these philosophies guide us in our daily struggles?
These texts offer timeless wisdom that goes way beyond the battlefield. They teach us about self-awareness, adaptability, strategic thinking, and above all, understanding. Not just in global conflicts, but in our own conflicts.
So applying those principles to those everyday situations.
Exactly. Think about it. How often do our conflicts stem from a lack of understanding, from failing to see things from another perspective? How often do we charge into situations without thinking of the consequences?
More often than we'd like to admit.
By embracing the wisdom of the I-Ching and the art of war, by cultivating self-awareness, practicing empathy, thinking strategically, we can navigate those personal battles more effectively and emerge stronger, wiser, more compassionate.
That's a powerful message. So what are some concrete takeaways our listeners can use?
First, always remember Sun Tzu's emphasis on knowing your ground, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, but also those of the person you're dealing with. What motivates them? What are their fears and aspirations? The more you understand the other side, the better you'll be at finding common ground.
Knowledge is power, but understanding is mastery. What else?
Second, remember, Hexagram 36 is called to be adaptable. Rigidity leads to breakdown. Flexibility allows you to adjust your approach, to find creative solutions, to navigate obstacles.
Like a willow bending in the wind.
Precisely. And finally, remember Hexagram 23's warning about decay, things falling apart. This highlights the importance of being proactive, anticipating potential conflicts or breakdowns, and taking steps to prevent them.
Like preventative maintenance.
Exactly. By applying these principles, you can increase your chances of success, whether it's a business deal, a personal conflict, or just navigating life.
This has been really insightful. We've covered a lot of ground from the Oval Office to ancient China. Can you recap?
We started with a confrontation between Trump and Zelensky, a clash of wills that exposed deeper tensions. We explored the fallout, the fractured alliance, the strained relations, and the potential impact on peace efforts. And we looked to the Yi-Jing and the art of war to understand the underlying dynamics of conflict and potential solutions.
And we learned that these ancient texts offer lessons for all of us.
Exactly. They teach us about self-awareness, empathy, strategic thinking, and the need for adaptation and growth.
This has been an incredible journey. But before we wrap up, one final question. Will Trump and Zelensky find common ground? Or will this lead to more conflict and a more unstable world?
That's the question that keeps me up at night. The future is uncertain, but I do believe there's hope. If they can set aside their egos, embrace understanding and adaptability, and prioritize the greater good, then maybe they can mend this peace and chart a course towards a better world.
A world where diplomacy triumphs, where empathy bridges divides, and where ancient wisdom guides us. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. An explosive meeting the fallout. Even tapped into some ancient wisdom for guidance. It's amazing how these principles from centuries ago, they still feel so relevant today.
Yeah, it speaks to human nature. You know, the challenges we face change, technologies change, but conflict and cooperation, understanding ourselves and others, those stay the same.
It's like history is trying to give us advice, but it's subtle.
Yeah.
You know, layered with all this nuance and complexity. That's why these deep dives are so valuable, to uncover the hidden forces.
Absolutely. We're bombarded with information constantly.
Yeah.
But it's the analysis, the connections, that deeper understanding that really matters.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key message here is that the world is complex, interconnected, constantly changing. Alliances shift, conflicts erupt, things can feel very unsteady.
Not exactly comforting.
But we're not powerless, we have agency. By understanding the forces at play, by learning from history, by cultivating empathy and strategic thinking, we can navigate these waters and contribute to a more stable and just world.
So not just watching, but engaging.
Exactly. Whether it's discussions, humanitarian efforts, or even the choices we make every day, we each have a role to play.
It all starts with awareness and then action. What can our listeners do to apply these lessons?
Well, remember Sun Tzu's advice about knowing your ground. That's for all of us, not just world leaders. Take time to understand the perspectives of those around you, your colleagues, family members, even strangers. What motivates them? What are their fears, their hopes? That understanding is how you build bridges.
They're curious about people.
Right. And another takeaway is adaptability. Remember how rigidity backfired in that meeting. Be flexible, be open to new information, find creative solutions.
Be the willow, not the oak.
Exactly. And don't forget to be proactive. Anticipate those potential conflicts. Address issues early on. It's like preventative maintenance.
Preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
I like that.
And lastly, remember that even small actions have an impact. Your choices, your voice, your engagement, it all matters.
This has been really eye-opening. Any final thoughts?
The deep dive never ends. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.
I love that. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the clash between Trump and Zelensky and the timeless wisdom that can guide us. Keep those minds curious, keep those hearts open, and remember, the world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.